Chapter 423. It used Sargon's spell to break realms, held an ancient-style staff, and started fighting without saying a word. After that, there was a flood and an evil giant beast. With so many distinctive features, who else could it be other than the cultists of the Cold Flame Church? Faust cursed the ancestors of the 4 mages of the church in his heart. The monster summoned by the other party basically had no attack power, but it did not say a word and directly lay on the observatory to absorb the magic power. This scared the hell out of Mr. Faust. His mustache trembled, and he did not care about the loss of magic power. He gave a few orders, and the observatory began to consciously counterattack. 7 objects similar to the flying stone he was on flew out. The objects flipped 180 degrees, and the side of the hexagram was facing the sea monster. 7 pale white electric lights struck the sea monster. This was a defensive method that Faust had modified using the original structure of the Mage Tower and his own knowledge. The star-casting spell was derived from the meaning of throwing starlight. The 7 starlights fired continuously, and the sea monster's body was smashed into pieces. However, the characteristics of the sea monster determined that it would not die as long as it had energy. It absorbed the energy of the observatory to repair its body, and the star-casting spell from the outside world continued to work, so it continued to absorb. "I'll get rid of you first." Faust was very decisive. He knew that he could not deal with such a shameless monster with his current means, so he set his sights on Thea. He grabbed his right wrist with his left hand, raised his right hand, and aimed his palm at Thea. Bang! 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 5 purple missiles were fired consecutively. Faust did not want to waste his energy to deal with the sea monster, and Thea did not want to fight with him, who was backed by the observatory and full of magic power. As long as this building was destroyed, the other party's true strength in her eyes was not even comparable to Mr. E. With a nimble turn, she avoided the missiles and continued to open a hole in the void. The violent flood rushed down again. Faust was in a dilemma. He wanted to defend the tower, but he could not. He wanted to fight, but the enemy did not want to fight with him at all. Thea's flying skills were 100 times better than his. Once she wanted to hide, the sky was so big that it was impossible to stop her. "Who are you? I don't know you." Faust didn't care about the divine artifact anymore. He didn't have the secret technique of observation, so he couldn't see through Thea's strength. However, she didn't show any signs of fatigue after such a long time, so he knew that she was a strong opponent. At this time, he already had the intention to compromise. "You don't know me?" Thea was here in her original appearance, so she was very unhappy. "How dare you say you don't know me when I am so famous?" There was nothing to say. He had to be taught a lesson. The seawater kept pouring into this small space. The space was airtight, and the seawater had nowhere to go. Half of the gate of the observatory was already submerged in the water. Thea was like the Jinshan temple being flooded by water. The wind and the waves were endless. As long as the magic power in this 2-story building was not working well, the huge pressure would be able to tear it down. "What do you want?" "I'll give you everything I have." Faust could feel that his beloved observatory was rapidly depleting, and the speed was getting faster and faster. In his heart, he had a deeper understanding of the crazy actions of the Cold Flame Vatican. They didn't want to take such a good ancient building, but wanted to destroy it instead. "Pa!" Thea ignored him and continued her battle. She pulled out Merlin's sword and activated the ice storm that came with the sword. As soon as the spell was cast, Thea was shocked. The power of this spell was twice as strong as when she cast it herself. Fist-sized hailstones fell into the narrow space like raindrops, densely covering the entire area. Even Thea was affected, not to mention Faust, whose flying skills were not up to standard and was only relying on external objects to show off. The hazy long face was hit continuously, and he lost control of his balance and fell into the sea. "It's so cold. Is this the level of an archmage?" Thea finally had a direct understanding of the spells of Merlin's era. The ice storm raged for a full 5 minutes. The space itself was full of seawater, and with the wind summoned by the ice storm, the temperature dropped by 50 degrees Celsius. The observatory was finally finished in the 3rd minute of the ice storm's rampage. First the windows, then the door, and finally the entire brick structure and foundation. The powerful seawater completely destroyed the former magic tower, and all the magic materials were destroyed. Only some bricks and tiles were left. Thea looked at her masterpiece and did not find any spoils of war. She controlled the sea beast to pull Faust out of the sea. The north wind blew and the snow fell. Even she, who had been transformed by divine power several times, felt cold, let alone Faust, who was only wearing a robe and soaking in the sea for 5 minutes. The long-faced, middle-aged man was no longer as arrogant as he was when they first met. He did not complain when the sea beast violently dragged him out. He had completely fainted from the cold, and his face was pale. Only his heart was still warm, and there were some frostbites on his hands and feet. Thea took one last look at the small space. It was completely destroyed. She reached out and took the middle-aged man. She cancelled the summoning of the sea beast and opened a portal to return to Malcolm's small cave. "Is this the guy who attacked you?" Thea threw the almost frozen Faust in front of them and asked for credit. Old Ma and Mr. Knight were chatting around the fire. Both of them had seen her come and go without a trace, so they were not surprised. They looked at the middle-aged man at the same time. "I think so." Mr. Knight was not sure. Faust was too flashy in the past, and now he looked like a dead dog. He was not very sure. "Is this guy?" Malcolm's training in the Assassin League was perfect. As long as the people he met were not turned into ashes, he would recognize them. Thea reached out and touched Faust's forehead. The weak magic power woke him up. Then, she sealed his magic power with 2 seals. She then signaled to Old Ma, "You can take revenge and interrogate me now." In fact, it was more convenient to read his mind directly with her spiritual power. However, in order to let Old Ma vent his anger, Thea still brought him back conscious. Malcolm was an expert in extorting confessions through torture. Mr. Faust was not a strong-willed man either. After a few lashes of the whip, he began to answer the questions. The sneak attack on Old Ma was indeed his own idea. At that time, he was meditating at the observatory, and the observatory had sent him an extremely dangerous signal that was similar to a disaster. He did not know what it meant. With the help of the huge magic power of the observatory, he completed a divination. The result of the divination was very vague, but it clearly showed that it was Malcolm and Old Ma. He took the initiative to strike first and fought with the demon in Jason Brad's body. Both sides suffered great losses. He was quite happy on the way back. He felt that the calamity corresponded to the 2 of them. He did not expect that just as he recovered from his injuries with the help of the observatory, the real calamity came. Faust looked at Thea, who was sitting by the fire, and his eyes were full of regret. Chapter 424. However, there was no point in regretting it. Facing Malcolm's questions, he answered truthfully. In the end, he even told him about the Morgan Laffey Temple in Peru. "How do we deal with this guy?" Malcolm asked Thea after knocking Faust out with a punch. He remembered that his daughter was a hero. "Up to you." Thea turned her head to the other side and said indifferently, "Faust was not a good person. In the future, he would cause a huge disaster to the entire world in eternal evil. It was not a bad thing to deal with him in advance." With a crack, Malcolm grabbed Faust's forehead and chin. With a twist of his hands, he ended his sinful life. "Let's go back first and discuss the next step of the plan," Thea said to the 2 of them. At the same time, she secretly gave Malcolm a look. Malcolm did not know what she was up to. He also needed to recover some of his strength. He nodded in agreement. The 3 of them passed through the portal. From the desolate cave, they came to a room with a strong technological aura. "This is my laboratory in the metropolis. You guys can take a rest first." Thea poured a glass of water for each of them. Jason Brad saw that the father and daughter had something to talk about in private. He tactfully walked out first. In fact, it was not bad to bring them to Star City for a reunion. However, Thea did not want Old Ma and Oliver to have a conflict. Old Robert's life was involved in this. This kind of hatred for killing one's father was difficult to resolve. Malcolm was not only Tommy and Thea's father, but he was also Oliver's father's enemy. In the face of a close friend and sister, Oliver was in a difficult position. The best way was to distance them from each other and not see each other for the rest of their lives. That would be the best. The father and daughter understood what happened after they parted. Thea specifically mentioned that Tommy had been injected with God's blood. She told old Ma not to hesitate anymore. She then took out a tube of gene optimization fluid from the laboratory and gave it to him. At this point, all of her relatives had been strengthened. As for the matter of popularizing the gene optimization fluid, Thea only thought about it and gave up on it. The benefits involved were too great. It was impossible to give the injection for free. The high price would cause serious conflicts in society. The rich with money and power would become stronger, and the poor would be even more powerless to resist. Ignoring the others, once the gene optimization fluid was released onto the market, Batman would definitely explode. Every villain would have a copy of the gene optimization fluid, such as a clown that had been injected with the strengthening fluid, a strengthened penguin scarecrow, etc. The danger level of Gotham would increase exponentially. That scene would be too terrifying and too beautiful. Maintaining the status quo was the right thing to do. It's like this. Thea organized her words. I've thought of a way to forcefully activate your bloodline. What should we do? You don't need to do too much. Just inject the God's blood and gene-strengthening fluid separately and adjust your body to its best condition. We'll start in 3 days. 3 days later, Malcolm, who had received a series of enhancements, stood there in high spirits as he watched Thea busy herself. He had experienced it deeply. After injecting the God's blood and the gene optimization fluid, his body was rejuvenated. His originally declining physical strength seemed to have returned to 20 years ago. The feeling of his strength, speed, and stamina returning to their peak was intoxicating. Jason Brad had fully recovered from his injuries in the past 3 days. He stood beside Malcolm and looked at Thea, who had been drawing circles on the ground for 3 days. Your daughter is really good to you, but can this really awaken any bloodline? The knight was a little doubtful. In his impression, even Merlin could not do this. If it could be done, it could. If it couldn't, it couldn't. If it could be awakened so easily, the world would be filled with wizards. Malcolm glanced at him and did not say anything. Thea had been working on it for 3 days without rest. He would definitely not back down now. In fact, the knight was not wrong. Merlin was indeed unable to do this. His era was too long ago, and the power of the spells of today's wizards could not be compared to that of his era. However, after 1,000 years, the refinement and ingenuity of spells were different from that of ancient times. A new path had been paved. In addition, Merlin's standards were too high. He only had eyes for the higher levels. He did not have the time to worry about a wizard apprentice's initiation ceremony. This created an objective reality that Thea could do what Merlin could not. The magic circle in front of him was a combination of modern magic and ancient magic. The most crucial point was that it made use of Zatanna and her daughter's irony magic to make the impossible possible, forcefully drawing out Malcolm's originally sparse and almost invisible bloodline. After that, it would be possible to use a large amount of magic to cleanse and reorganize it. What Sia had drawn was a huge ironic magic circle. She had also borrowed a lot of Sargon's knowledge. This magic circle could be said to be the culmination of all the skills of the current generation. She threw 3 gemstones to Malcolm. There were 3 greater healing spells stored in them. They were created using gemstone magic. When Malcolm walked into the magic circle, Thea began to recite the spell. She had to recite the entire spell in reverse. This task was very mentally taxing. Even with her high intelligence, she had to stumble and her face was pale. Fortunately, with the help of the magic circle and a few precious tools provided by the Cold Flame Vatican, the first step was daunting but not dangerous. There was already a faint shadow of magic in Malcolm's body. Steady! The next step is the key. Thea shouted loudly. She stretched out her hand and took out the God of Death's staff. Previously, when she summoned the sea monster to destroy Faust's observatory, the sea monster returned a portion of its magic to the staff before it turned into nothingness. Thea wanted to absorb the non-elemental magic herself, but she gave up after thinking for a long time. The magic was absorbed by the observatory from the other dimension for hundreds of years. It was scattered and not very pure. If converted to Thea's magic, it was only 2 or 3 years' worth of magic. It was just icing on the cake. If she used it to strengthen Malcolm's body, it would be a different story. It was a timely help. Thea raised the staff and directed the magic to follow the path of the magic circle, all the way to the center point, which was Malcolm's body. The non-elemental mana activated the crimson magic circle and surged into Malcolm's body. His weak mana was nourished and grew at a rate visible to the naked eye. "That's it?" Mr. Knight asked curiously. He didn't mind making things worse. Far from it. Sia was not as optimistic as Malcolm. Purification was the first step to extraction. Malcolm's current mana was only enough to fulfill the conditions for extraction. He was still far from success. Seeing that Malcolm's body was shaking a little, Sia knew that his magic power had reached its limit. She stopped the non-elemental magic power output, and a small magic circle appeared in the magic circle. It was the same as what Damien had done. This was the real bloodline purification magic circle.